Before the word for love, in a time before names, before the tongue could form I love you, there were only glances, firelight, and shared silences that felt like truth. Before love had a word, it had a rhythm. It moved in the space between two heartbeats. It drifted on the breath between questions never asked. It shimmered faintly, like heat on stone, like memory before memory. The child didn't know the feeling had a name. They only knew that something shifted gently, like a breeze through summer reeds every time the other stood nearby. There was no ceremony, no sudden thunder in the chest, only awareness, only a lightness in the limbs, a hunger in the gaze, and a stillness that came when laughter passed like a bird between trees. The fire was low that night, coals red and dreaming. Above, the stars burned without order, scattered across the dark like stories waiting for form. And around the fire, the clan sat in quiet circles, some picking sinew with bone needles, some mending baskets with reeds, some simply listening to the elders' tale words that had no word for love but came close. A child watched the flames. Another child not far, not near glanced toward them. Eyes met, only for a moment, but it felt like a crossing, like a branch laid between two shores. They said nothing, but something ancient leaned forward in the shadows listening. The days were long now. Summer wrapped the land in golden hush. Leaves did not tremble unless touched by wind. Rabbits nested under thick brush. The stream ran clear and slow, its banks crowded with dragonflies and yellow grass. And still the feeling grew. Not loudly, not like hunger or thirst, but like the slow unfurling of ferns, like roots deepening. When they walked together, and they often did, without planning to, they walked in rhythm. When one laughed, the other did not always understand why, but they smiled all the same. When they foraged berries, their fingers brushed once, neither pulled away. And that night both lay awake beneath their own tents, staring at the same piece of sky. There were no temples then, but there were sacred places. The cave at the river bend, the old stone ringed with ochre handprints, the ash tree with its bark carved in spirals, and this space between two hearts felt no less holy. They did not kiss, not yet, not in the way people would someday name it. But one day, beneath a canopy of trembling leaves, they pressed their foreheads together and breathed the same air, and the forest sighed. In the camp, no one said anything, not because they did not know, but because they did. The mother saw how the child watched. The brother noticed how laughter came more easily now. The grandmother paused when she saw them seated close, weaving reeds side by side, not speaking, not needing to. And so the clan, wise with silence, said nothing, because love, when it is new, is like flame, too much wind and it vanishes, too much force and it burns. In this time, before love had a name, it was shaped instead by the things it moved. A feather left on a sleeping mat. A water skin filled and waiting at the edge of a trail. A smooth stone traded not for value, but because it reminded me of you. A carved bead tied into the hem of a tunic, hidden from all but one. They did not yet dream of forever. They only dreamed of now, of walking beside, of laughter shared in the river, of the quiet hum of breath when the fire burned low and sleep came slowly. Some nights the child would wake, heart beating too fast, not with fear, with something else. And in the dark, where only the stars were witness, they would smile without knowing why, because somewhere nearby the other child dreamed too, and some dreams echo. One evening, after a hunt, the sky turned a soft grey, not storm, just dusk. The two sat side by side on the hill, overlooking the trail of smoke curling from the camp. The grass leaned with the wind, Birds gathered above, making plans no human would ever understand. And the child turned, not sure what they would say. But the other spoke first. "Do you feel it?" they asked, not meeting their eyes. The child nodded. They didn't need to ask what it was. They just did. There are stories older than words, emotions that lived before language, connections that bloomed before the mouth learned to name them. In the Stone Age, love was not declared. It was witnessed. By the way one returned with the sweeter root, by the path always walked side by side, by the firelight flickering across two faces turned toward each other. And when, years later, someone first carved a symbol into the bark a shape that would one day mean affection, they did so thinking not of kings or warriors, but of a glance held too long, of fingers tangled in reeds, of two children on a quiet hill, whispering nothing, but meaning everything. Before the word for love, there was love. It moved through the grass. It shimmered in firelight. It echoed in glances and warmed the breath. And it waited, patient and eternal, for names to catch up. But even without them, it was always there. The first glance. The fire was not hungry tonight. It burned low, steady. Orange coils dancing gently, more whisper than roar. Around it the clan gathered not in lines, not in rows, but in a wide breathing circle. Some sat on furs, others on stones. A few lay on their sides, elbows propped, faces lit by flickers of flame. It was a night like many others. Cool air wrapping the clearing, embers rising like red stars to join their silver kin overhead. The moon crouched behind thin clouds, watching through slits. No storm on the horizon, no warning from the dogs, just the soft hum of wood, the rhythmic sharpening of bone and the rustle of story. The elder spoke, not with urgency but with patience, her words rising like smoke curling through memory. She told of a time before time, a hunt that lasted 5 days, a river that sang in 3 voices. Children leaned forward. Mothers wove grass cords. Fathers passed flint knives from hand to hand, feeling their edges, nodding softly. And amid it all the child sat, still, silent, eyes on the fire, until, without knowing why, they looked across the flame. The other child sat just opposite, half lit by the glow, half swallowed by shadow. Their eyes met. Not for long, just a breath. Just enough for the world to shift. The child felt it, a flutter, a pause in the belly, like the moment before stepping into cold water or hearing their name called in a crowd. Not yet love, not even want, only awareness, only the echo of something beginning. They had seen each other before, of course. They'd grown in the same camp, shared the same stories, walked the same trails to the river. But tonight the glance held weight. Not heavy, not dangerous, just full, like the hush before dawn or the press of ripe fruit in the hand. The fire crackled. The elder's voice wove on. But now the child heard little. Their ears were still, but their chest was noisy. They looked down, then up again. The other child was still watching, not staring, just present, as if they'd both turned the same page of a book no one had written. The moment passed. A log shifted in the fire. Sparks jumped, and both looked away, as if the glance had been too bright to hold. Around them, the circle of the clan pulsed on. The dogs stirred, a baby whimpered. Someone laughed low and long. The elder paused to sip broth, and the story bent in a new direction. But something had changed. Later, when the fire burned lower, still no longer orange, now blue-grey and dreaming, the clan dispersed. Tents waited, bellies full, voices spent. Parents scooped up drowsy children, grandmothers patted the earth smooth before sleeping. Fathers checked the boundary stones. Mothers stirred the ashes for morning's first spark. The child walked slowly to the sleeping place. The fur blanket waited. The mat of woven grass still smelled of sun, but the air around them felt different now. They lay on their back, eyes wide. Above, the stars blinked. Below, the earth held still. And somewhere across the camp, just a few tents away, the other child did the same. Neither knew it, but they breathed in rhythm. The next morning they did not speak. The child rose early, as always, feet bare, necklace of carved shell clicking gently as they stretched. The others were gathering roots near the trees. Someone called for water. A mother scolded softly. A father motioned for silence as he spotted deer far off. And in all of it, the child looked just once toward the edge of the clearing. There, by the edge of the stream, stood the other child, face turned to the water, kneeling, scooping it in cupped palms. The light caught the strands of their hair, the wind pulled at the edge of their tunic, and just for a moment they turned and saw. Eyes met again, softer this time, no flutter, no jolt, only quiet. Like the hum beneath the world, like moss remembering footsteps. The child did not smile, neither did the other, but both knew. Something had begun. In the days that followed, they passed each other often, by the fires, by the trees, by the riverbank where frogs croaked and dragonflies wrote invisible names in the air. Each time a glance, each time a pause. It was not courtship, they did not know such a word. It was not longing they had never been told to want. It was simply noticing and being noticed. A stone placed gently on the ground beside a basket. A berry chosen and handed without words. A shared smile when a dog barked at its own shadow. Small things, things the others barely saw. But to the child, they were everything. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the treetops, the two found themselves alone. Not by plan, only by the rhythm of the day. The others had gone to gather fish. The dogs had followed. And here, in the long grass by the stream they stood, not close, not far, just enough. The breeze tugged at their clothes. A heron lifted from the water, wings wide, and in the hush it left behind the child turned. The glance came again. But this time it stayed. This time it held. And in that holding the child felt it. Not yet love, but its beginning, like the first crack of light before dawn, like a seed beneath the soil, waiting. They said nothing, only looked. And somewhere deep in the forest, something old and wild exhaled. The river shifted, the trees leaned closer, and the world, just for a moment, stood still. It was only a glance, but it was enough. Because the first note of any song is never the loudest. It is the one that makes you listen. Hands in the earth. The day began with fog in the hollows and dew on the grass, not cold, but close to it. The kind of morning that kissed the ankles and filled the lungs with green. The forest had not yet shaken off sleep. Mist clung to the edges of ferns, and the sky wore a faded shawl of silver cloud. Children gathered at the camp's edge, baskets swinging, braids still half done. Today was for foraging, not the quick picking of berries, but the slower, deeper work of digging, of pulling secrets from beneath the earth. Wild onions, finger roots, knots of starchy bulbs that slept beneath the moss, waiting for calloused hands to find them. The child was among them, eyes alert, basket in hand, fingers already stained from yesterday's berries. And there at the edge of the group, near the trailhead where bark peeled from a leaning pine, stood the other child. Their eyes met again. No surprise this time, no jolt or flutter, only something steady, like two streams flowing side by side, not yet touching but curving toward the same bend. The group moved out in loose rhythm, not marching but drifting like pollen in wind. They fanned out through the undergrowth, scanning the earth, knees pressed into moss, palms turned soil. The clan had no word for agriculture, no plough, no furrowed fields, but they knew where food hid, how it returned when gathered with care, how the land gave back what was taken gently. Digging was quiet work. It asked for attention, for patience. The child worked in silence beneath a large oak, its roots knotting through the ground like old knuckles. Their basket lay nearby, lined with leaves. A bone tool scraped in smooth arcs. Dirt gave way in slow breaths. Then the sound of another scraping close by. The child glanced sideways. The other was there, not too close, not too far. Kneeling, digging, head tilted just enough to show they'd noticed. Neither said a word. They did not need to. Between them, the forest hummed, wind stroking high branches, a jay calling from above, the slow chorus of insects waking with the day. Their hands moved not in unison, but in a mirrored dance. One found a fat root and brushed it clean. The other lifted a bulb and placed it gently in their basket, each motion quiet, intentional. At times, their digging lines curved toward each other, soil loosened in a shared patch, one mound becoming two. And then it happened. Not planned, not forced, just fingers brushed. Not fully, not a grip, just the back of one hand grazing the edge of another. Dirt-smudged skin against dirt-smudged skin. The child froze, not out of fear, but recognition. The other paused too, eyes lowered. Stillness bloomed between them. The moment hung like fruit on a high branch. It didn't fall, it didn't break. It simply existed. The touch was nothing and everything. No one saw, no one spoke, but the earth felt it. Soil shifted. A beetle turned a pebble. Somewhere in the loam a seed split. They returned to digging, but the air had changed. Before it was mist and green and quiet work. Now it was charged. Not tense, just aware. They did not touch again, not in that moment, but their digging lines stayed close. One would glance, and the other would meet their gaze for half a breath. One would laugh softly at a crooked root, and the other would echo it not out loud, but in the curve of their lips. And between them, the earth remembered. Later, a call from deeper in the trees. An elder had found a patch of burrow fruit, rare and sweet. The children gathered, racing over moss and stone. But the two stayed behind just a little longer. One more root, one more glance. When they finally stood, baskets half full, they walked in step, not side by side, but near enough to hear each other's breathing. Their shoulders didn't touch. Their hands stayed busy, but the space between them felt stitched, like something invisible had reached from one heart to the other and tied a knot. At the gathering site, others were laughing, chewing on raw shoots, wiping mud from their legs. No one noticed the two arriving a little late. No one saw how their eyes found each other again before joining the circle. But the forest saw. The wind knew. The earth always knows. That evening the child sat by the fire once more. The same circle, the same elder's voice, the same smoke rising like stories into the night. But their hands still remembered. Underneath their fingernails, soil clung, on their palm the faint warmth where the other's skin had brushed. And somewhere out there across the circle, beyond the firelight, the other sat too, hands folded, eyes lowered, basket of roots beside them. They did not look across the flames this time. Not yet. The glance would come later. For now, they both carried something unspoken, held in the dirt, carried in the blood. A touch, a silence, a beginning. The soil had witnessed it. And the soil, like all things in the old world, did not forget. Because in the Stone Age, love did not arrive with words. It arrived with hands, with dirt, with the smallest brush of skin beneath an old oak tree. And the child, heart steady but stirred, knew only this, that something beautiful had taken root. The river watches. The river had always been there. Long before the first basket was woven, before the first ember lit the first fire, before the child knew the shape of their own hands, the river flowed. It did not shout. It did not sleep. It moved, slow and steady, the way time moves through memory, folding, returning, forgetting nothing. And today the children ran to it. Their feet beat soft thunder into the dust bath, bare soles thudding like drums over roots and old leaves. Voices echoed among the trees, not words, not many, just bursts of laughter, shrieks of joy, the wild music of summer in motion. The air was warm but not yet heavy. A breeze carried the scent of mint and wet stone. Dragonflies darted above heads. Butterflies scattered like loose petals. Somewhere far above, a hawk cried once, then vanished. The river waited. It curved through the forest like a sleeping snake, silver-backed, slow-eyed, cold at its edges but warm where the sun kissed it all morning. And when the children arrived, the river did not stir. It had seen many such arrivals. It would see many more. But even so, it watched. They leapt in, one after another. Some cannoned into the deeper part, arms flung wide, legs kicking. Others slid down the mossy bank, toes curled, bracing for the cold. Shouts rose like birds. Splashes chased splashes. Water flew like thrown light. The child. Our child hesitated only a moment before joining them. A quick look over the shoulder, a grin, then a run, a jump, a full plunge into the shallows. They came up gasping, slick-haired, grinning. Across the ripples the other was already there, waist-deep, hands scooping water, eyelashes dripping. They locked eyes for half a breath, then turned away as if that look hadn't meant anything at all. But the river saw it. Games began, as they always did. They built small dams with stones, daring the water to change its mind. They lined up sticks and called them boats. They raced them down the current, cheering for whichever twig was theirs. One child found a turtle shell and wore it like a helmet until it slipped over their eyes. Another slipped on moss and laughed so hard they swallowed river. But always, even in the chaos, the child was aware of the other, their presence, their nearness. Once, while helping place stones for the race, their hands nearly touched again. Neither pulled away quickly, but neither lingered either. Instead, they splashed each other laughing like it meant nothing. But the river felt the moment, tucked it under its surface like a smooth stone. Time passed like water itself. The sun rose higher, shadows changed shape. A quietness crept in, not silence, but a softer kind of play. Fewer shouts, more floating, more watching clouds and drawing things in the mud. In the bend beneath the leaning tree where the river was slow and deep, the child sat alone, feet dangling in the cool. The water tickled their ankles, whispered against skin. And then the other came. Not loud, not shy either, just there, as if pulled by the same invisible thread. They sat nearby, not close enough to touch, but close enough to share the same shadow. For a while neither spoke. They threw pebbles into the current, watched them vanish, counted the ripples. Then, "I think that one looked like a face," the other said, pointing at a cloud. The child followed their gaze. "No," they said softly, "more like a mammoth." They looked at each other, laughed together, then fell quiet again. A leaf floated past red and gold, too early for autumn. It turned slowly in the current, drifting between them. The other reached for it, but missed. The child caught it. For a moment they just held it dripping, soft-edged, already folding. Then, without thinking, they offered it. A gift. The other blinked. took it, smiled. The river carried the moment away but did not let it go. They waded back to the group as the sun tilted westward. Shadows lengthened. A breeze picked up, bringing the scent of campfire smoke from far off. Others were drying on rocks, wrapped in deerskin, picking burrs from hair. One had found a dead fish and was poking it with a stick. Another was braiding grass. But the two walked slower. No one noticed. Only the river. Before leaving, the children did what they always did. They whispered wishes into the current. Some did it playfully. Others closed their eyes, holding small stones to their chests, then flung them far. The child held theirs round, flat, perfect. They thought of nothing specific, only a feeling, a warmth in the chest, a moment that might come again, a hope not yet named. The stone hit the water with a soft splash, and beside them the other did the same but did not look away afterward, not this time. They both stood there, feet in water, eyes meeting, not for long, but long enough. The walk back was quiet. The group talked, laughed, joked about who won which race, who got the most leeches, who stepped on the squishiest mud. But the child walked slightly apart, and the other did too. Sometimes their arms swung in rhythm, sometimes their steps matched, but they did not speak. They didn't need to. That night, as stars blinked into the black and the fire crackled low, the child sat near the edge of the circle, mud still under their nails, hair still damp, basket beside them, empty but for a single folded leaf. The elder told a story about rivers, how they remember everything that touches them, how old waters carry old secrets, how a river sees what even eyes miss. And the child listened not with ears alone, but with skin, with memory, with something else. Far across the fire the other sat still, knees drawn up, eyes reflecting flame. They didn't glance this time. They didn't need to, because the river had already seen enough, and so had they. The river watches, the river remembers, the river keeps the story safe until they are ready to tell it. The gift of a feather. Night in the camp is not silent. It breathes. The flames crackle low, tucked beneath the skin of sleeping logs. A pot cools over coals, its scent fading into ash. The last embers blink like fireflies. Somewhere a dog yawns, turns in a circle and folds into itself. Moths bat against the hide walls, soft as blinking eyes. And under the stars children sleep. Not all at once, not for long. Sleep in the camp comes in waves, some drift quick, some fight it, some lie still with eyes wide, watching shadows stretch and curl across the tent's ceiling. Our child sleeps lightly tonight. Not troubled, but aware, as if some part of them waits for something. Their breath slows, deepens, but the fingers still twitch slightly against the moss bedding. Outside the forest hums. A distant owl calls. The wind sighs through the ferns like a grandmother murmuring secrets in her sleep. And there beside the child's mat, near the edge of the tent's opening, lies something new. A feather. Not just any feather, not one lost from the camp's hens or scattered from the forest floor. This one is long and clean, its edges smooth, its colour dappled in a way only one bird carries, the river hawk. The feather is wrapped in a loop of braided grass, bound in a knot so familiar the child knows immediately who made it. There is no name, there is no need. The child does not reach for it yet. They simply lie there in the dim hush of pre-dawn, listening to the camp breathe, letting the meaning of the gift fill the quiet spaces between their ribs. Earlier that day, they'd not spoken much. A few glances across the circle at mealtime, a shared grin when the youngest cousin tried to wrestle a fish from the pot too early, a moment when they passed a water pouch between them, hands touching not by accident. And that was all. But it had been enough. Now, this. A feather. braided grass, placed not at the fire, not at the centre where everyone might see, but here beside their resting place, close enough to be found, quiet enough to be private. It meant something, not declaration, not demand, not even confession, just something soft, an offering, a question maybe, or an answer. When the morning light first touched the trees, the child was already awake. They did not leap up or call out. They sat quietly, cross-legged, feather in hand, holding it like a cup of warm milk. The braided grass smelled faintly of river mint. The feather tickled their palm. Across the clearing the others stirred. Mothers lifted pots, fathers yawned. A dog barked once and was shushed. Children blinked at the sun and stretched like vines after rain. But the child remained still. Then a movement. From the corner of their eye, a familiar figure passed between tents carrying a basket, not hurrying, not watching. But as they turned the corner, the other looked up just once and their eyes met. No smile, no wave, just the smallest nod, and then they were gone. Later that morning, the child braided a strand of dry grass, not too tight, not too loose. Their fingers worked slowly, carefully, a rhythm without words, not to return the gift, not yet, but just to understand it, to hold the gesture in their own hands, to feel what it meant to make something quiet and true. The clan moved through the day as they always did. Children ran, mothers sang, elders muttered about stories waiting for night. A broken bowl was mended, a new fishhook was carved, smoke lifted into the air like a second sky. But the child saw everything differently. The ground seemed warmer beneath their steps. The trees leaned in as if listening more closely. Even the dogs seemed to understand, brushing against their legs with soft snorts and amber eyes that seemed to say, "We know." At the river, the child did not race. They sat on the same mossy stone as before. The water was cold, a snail inched past, a leaf drifted, spinning like a coin, and the other appeared again, quiet as shadow. They did not sit beside the child this time, but close enough to be near. No words were traded, only silence, only the river between them, and a shared memory of a feather. That night, as the fire returned to the centre of the camp, the elder told a story, one they hadn't told in many seasons. It was about the birds who chose their mates by leaving feathers in each other's nests. Not brightly coloured birds, not the ones who sang the loudest, but the soft ones, the ones who flew close to the river and built their homes where no one else could see. The elder spoke slowly, voice like wind through dry reeds. And the feather, she said, was never taken back. It remained not because it was demanded, but because it was wanted. The child did not look across the fire, but they smiled into the flames, and beneath their shirt, close to the heart, the feather rested wrapped in its loop of grass. The gift was never spoken of, but it was never forgotten. And the next morning, the other would find something tucked into the crook of a tree root near the river path. A stone not large, not shining, but smooth as skin and shaped like a teardrop. Wrapped around it was a thread of sinew tied just once. Not a trade, not a message, just a quiet echo. Yes. Before there were words for love, there were gestures. There were gifts made by hand, shaped by thought, left in silence. And in the hush between firelight and sleep, two children understood something the world had no language for yet. But the heart did, and the river did, and the feather remained. Shadows and firelight. Night arrives slowly in the camp, not with sudden dark, but with quiet invitations. A slow cooling of the ground beneath bare feet, the way the trees hush one by one, the way the sky folds into violet, then navy, then black dotted with stars like scattered seeds. Smoke thickens near the fire circle. Children begin to settle reluctantly. Someone whistles low, calling the dogs back from wherever the dark might tempt them. Pots are scraped, mats are unrolled. Elders stretch tired bones and begin gathering around the heart of the camp. Tonight is a story night. Not every night is. Some nights are for sleep, for silence, for the rhythm of insects and dreams. But some nights, like this one, arrive heavy with memory. The fire burns higher. The circle fills, and everyone knows the past is about to walk among them. Our child sits just outside the reach of the light, close enough to feel its warmth on their shins, but far enough that shadows still dance across their cheeks. They watch the flames with wide eyes, trying not to glance too often to the side. But they do. Because next to them, shoulder barely touching theirs, is the other. The one who left the feather. The one who found the smooth stone near the river root. The one who says nothing now, but whose presence fills the space between them like a drumbeat too quiet for ears. An elder begins, not with a shout, not even with words. First comes the pause, the sacred pause where breath gathers and the fire listens. Then, softly, long ago, before we could walk upright, we were wolves. The children hush. Eyes sharpen. The dogs stir at the mention of their name. We hunted under the moon and spoke with our feet and teeth. But one night a spark fell from the stars and landed in our fur. The fire cracks. It burned not with pain, but with remembering. It told us we were more, not just teeth, not just paws, but makers, dreamers, listeners. The story winds on, winding like a path through pine. And while the tale holds the camp in its rhythm, the child listens with only half their mind. The other half is lost in the firelight on the other's skin, in the way their lashes catch the flame and blink gold, in the way their foot brushes just close enough not by accident, not this time, in the small shared breath when both laugh at the same line in the tale, a chuckle low and real, not loud but full of something that feels round and new, a sound that no one else hears the same way. The elder finishes. And that, she says, is how we learn to carry fire in our bellies and stories on our tongues. The fire sighs lower, sparks drift upward, silence stretches long and welcome. Then others speak, not storytellers, but those with fragments. I saw a fox with two tails once. My grandfather used to say the trees sleep standing up. There's a place in the cliffs where voices echo even if you don't speak. Each voice adds to the fire like twigs tossed on coals. And slowly, slowly, the circle tightens. The child leans in. The other leans too. And now their shoulders press, soft but sure. Now the warmth isn't just from the fire. Someone passes dried berries, pressed into sweet cakes. The child takes one, then another offers the second sideways without a glance. A hand reaches, fingers brush, hold a moment longer than they must. Across the circle, an old woman hums. It's not a song, it's older than song, a melody without a name known only to the bones. The children still, eyes half closed. Even the dogs lie flat now, breath slow, tail still. And in this hush the child leans closer, not touching more, just sharing space, sharing story, sharing silence. The fire dims, the circle fades. People drift off. One by one, children carried, elders helped, cousins giggling into the dark. But the two remain, for a moment longer. Just one more heartbeat. Then they rise, slowly, not looking at each other, not yet. The walk back to the tents is quiet. The stars burn brighter now, the moon, a low smile on the horizon. And behind them, the fire sighs into sleep. Inside the tent, the child does not lie down immediately. They sit for a while, legs crossed, hands still tingling from the earlier touch. The fire is gone now, just memory in their skin. But memory is enough. And in the dim, a small grin forms, soft, hidden. But there, no words were spoken, no promises made. But something passed between them tonight beneath the stories, beneath the sparks. A thread, a knowing, a yes. And outside the forest rustles, the earth turns. The wind carries an ember away into the trees. Love, before it is love, is story. It is firelight and shadows, a glance that lingers, a laugh shared, a hand that doesn't let go too fast. And though they do not know the word for it, the child understands something beautiful is becoming. Dance of the full moon. The moon rose heavy that night, not pale or shy, but bold, round, full as a drum. It climbed through the black canopy like a silver eye, watching the world below with ancient patience. And the world answered not with words, but with motion, with beat, with breath. Tonight was the night of the dance. The air crackled, not with fire, but with waiting. Leaves whispered secrets to each other in the dark. Dogs paced in circles, ears twitching. Somewhere in the forest an owl called once low and slow, then fell silent, as if even it knew not to interrupt what was coming. At the edge of the camp the circle had been cleared. The ground was packed hard by many feet, ringed by stones and the ghost of past footsteps. A fire burned at its heart high, bright, fed greedily by logs wrapped in resin. Sparks soared upward like tiny stars, chasing their older siblings into the sky. People gathered, slowly at first like a tide unsure of its strength, then more, then all, the old, the young, the hunters, the mothers, the watchers and weavers. The circle filled, and the drums began. They started deep. Not loud, but low, the kind of rhythm that crawls up through the soles of your feet and into your ribs. Boom, boom, boom. A heartbeat larger than any body, a call older than any name. The child stood near the edge, eyes wide, hands fidgeting, then still. Next to them others swayed gently, waiting. No one rushed. The dance did not begin because someone said now. It began because the moment arrived. And it did. A woman stepped forward, wrapped in painted skin, her arms raised, her body bent at the knee, swayed, twisted. The fire lit her from below, gold and red in shadow. Then a second joined, a third, and the circle moved. They danced not for show, not for praise, but because the earth asked them to. Each stomp was a reply, each spin a word, each breath a prayer without syllables. Children laughed as they circled the outside, elders clapped. Someone sang a low hum that wove through the drumbeat like smoke through air. The child stepped forward, not to be seen, not to perform, just to be closer. And there, among the swaying bodies beneath the moon so full it seemed to buzz they saw them. The other, the one. The same eyes that had met theirs by the fire, the same fingers that had touched bark beside the roots. The one who had left the feather. Now they were moving, not dancing like the others wild and wide, but small, controlled, spiraling through space like a leaf caught in a breeze. Their eyes were closed. Their body listened. And the child watched, rooted to the spot, afraid to blink in case the magic might vanish. Then a hand, offered gently, palm open, no demand, no pull, just offering. The child stared for half a breath, then another, then reached. Their fingers met in the dark where firelight couldn't reach, and in that moment the night changed shape. They moved together. Not with steps learned or practiced, but with instinct, with mimicry, with trust. Side by side they swayed, stumbled, laughed. The drums rose louder. The fire burned higher. Around them, the clan blurred a sea of spinning limbs and painted faces, but they were a quiet eddy in the centre of the storm, a stillness that moved. Their feet found rhythm, the hands didn't part, and when they turned, one circling the other, the moon caught their eyes and they smiled. Not big, not bold, but enough. Enough to say, I see you. Enough to whisper, I am seen. Nearby, a girl with copper beads in her braids tossed leaves into the fire. The flames leapt blue. Someone shouted in joy. 2 boys leapt over the edge of the fire pit, rolling in dust, faces streaked with ash. But none of it mattered here, in the small circle formed by 2 clasped hands, where fingers whispered, where breath danced before words ever could. Time loosened. The drums did not stop. The moon did not blink. But the night stretched, wider and longer than usual, like the universe itself had slowed to let them move. The child didn't know what to call this warmth, this closeness, this urge to stay near without reason. But the body knew, the heart knew, even if the tongue stayed still. Eventually the dance softened, the fire calmed, the drummers slowed, hands aching, smiles wide. People staggered back to their tents, limbs sore and spirits light. Children lay where they fell, curled beside dogs and cousins. Someone still sang a lullaby now. The owl hooted again, its voice less curious, more satisfied. And in the hush that followed, 2 children sat, side by side. Hands no longer clasped, but close enough to touch. The moon hung above them, watching, approving, and the fire crackled softly between them. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. The dance had said it all. When they finally stood to go, the child glanced back once at the circle, at the ashes, at the footprints worn deep into the dust. And they thought, I will remember this, even when I am old, even when the drums fall silent, even when words come. Because long before there was a word for love, there was this, a hand in the dark, a step in rhythm, a smile shared under a watching moon. The drift of distance. The days had lengthened. Summer still pressed warm palms to the skin, but something had shifted. Not in the trees, nor the river, nor the fire. No, the shift was quieter, close to something that sat beneath the ribs like a small stone, unnoticed at first, but impossible to ignore once felt. The child still woke at dawn, still listened for birdsong, still crouched beside the stream, scooping cool water into open hands, but their gaze wandered now not toward the sunrise, but toward the edge of camp, toward them, the other, the one whose hand had once fit theirs like bark around branch, the one who danced beneath the full moon, smiled without words, and knew the fire's rhythm like a second heartbeat. They had not smiled in days. It had started with a word, not a cruel word, not sharp, but one overheard, misplaced, misheard, a name spoken, a glance misread, a laugh shared with someone else. It echoed louder than the drums had that night, louder than the moonlight. The child had heard it, felt it, a knife with no edge, and yet it cut. That morning they had gone gathering roots as they always did, but when the elder pointed to a place in the soil, they split off, one to the left, the other to the right. No fingers brushed, no eyes met, no earth passed between them like a secret. Only space, only silence. And silence, when once filled with rhythm, feels like absence. The camp noticed, though no one said it aloud. The mothers still braided hair, the elders still sang low songs in the afternoons, the dogs still slept in rings near the fire. But some eyes lingered longer when the two passed each other without a nod. They used to sit close knees, nearly touching during story time, sharing a bowl of berries like it was ritual. Now, the child sat beside their brother, the other beside an aunt, the space between them filled not with words or warmth, but air heavy and still. The fire still burned, but it no longer danced. There was a new face in camp, a visitor from another clan, older, louder. His voice rang like flint on stone. His laughter came in bursts like sparks off a wheel. He had arrived with fish and stories and eyes that looked too long. He spoke to everyone, but mostly to them, the one, the other. The hand the child had once held in the dark, and they had laughed. A real laugh, a full one, but not with the child. The misunderstanding bloomed slowly, not like a flower, but like moss on stone, quiet, creeping, undeniable. A look misread, a choice unspoken, a step taken alone. They no longer walked together in the mornings, no longer raced stones by the river or wove reed crowns in secret. The small hollow beneath the tree, their hiding place, now held only spiders and dry leaves. No whispers, no dreams, only the wind. The child felt it most when no one else watched. Not in the loud moments of fire and feast, but in the pauses, when steam rose from soup in early light, when they saw the other child reach for berries and pull away without speaking, when their hands brushed by accident and did not linger. There was no anger, not truly, only confusion, only ache, only the ache of a bond once tight, now slack like a snare loosened in the night, releasing what it meant to hold. The child did not know how to fix it. There were no words for "I miss you." No song for "come back." No sign for "why did you laugh at someone else's joke but not mine?" So the days passed. Slower now. Heavier. The path to the stream felt longer, the games by the river more hollow, the laughter of others like echoes from a place the child could no longer reach. They carved fewer marks into bark. They hummed fewer songs. They ate more slowly. And when night came, they watched the stars alone. Once they tried. They found a stone, smooth, grey-blue, shaped like a teardrop. They tucked it into the other's mat while no one looked. Peace offering, a whisper in stone. The next morning it was gone. No smile, no touch, no sign. The silence thickened. The world itself seemed to notice. The wind no longer curled so playfully through the tents. The dogs growled at the edges of camp more often. The sun, though still warm, felt like it kept its distance. Even the river seemed quieter, less like laughter, more like memory. The child remembered the feather, how it had been left without a name, how it had meant everything. And now nothing remained. Just the space between two sleeping mats, just the empty log by the fire, just the half-told story waiting for an end that would not come. The clan prepared for the next hunt. Bows were restrung, spears tested, packs filled. The other was going. The child was not. They would stay with the gatherers this time, the elders said. The river's edge needed attention. There were roots to collect. The child nodded, but inside something wilted. When the group left, the child stood at the edge of the trees, watched as the other walked steps firm, head high, shoulders squared. They didn't turn around. Not once. The forest swallowed them in silence. And the child, still as stone, whispered into the wind, "I don't know what I did, but I wish you were still here. I wish we still danced." Far away the owl watched from its branch. And the moon, no longer full, listened in sliver-shaped sorrow. Somewhere in the woods the drums would beat again. But not tonight, not here. Here the fire still burned, but it no longer warmed. words that don't exist. Some feelings come before the words that name them. The clan had no word for forgiveness, no sound shaped by tongue and teeth that meant I am sorry or I did not know how to say what I felt. Their language was made of survival, of stone and smoke, of water and fire, of directions and dangers. And so, when the child tried to speak, they found only silence. Not because nothing was there, but because what was there had no name. So they tried something older. They tried presence. The camp breathed slowly that morning. A storm had passed in the night, leaving the trees rinsed and the sky pale with new light. Mud clung to the edges of the tents. A few logs near the fire still steamed. The scent of wet ash clung to everything. Children leapt across puddles laughing. Mothers scraped dirt from drying hides. The old man with a missing tooth slept deeper than usual, his snoring a rhythm older than speech. And the child rising from their mat carried a thought like a fire wrapped in moss, smouldering, soft, persistent. Maybe today they could say something, or show something. The one they once walked beside sat near the edge of camp, shelling roasted seeds into a woven pouch. The air between them was no longer sharp, but it still held shape. Like the skin of a healed wound, closed, but not forgotten. The child walked past once. Then again. Their shadow crossed the other's hand. No words, no reaction. At midday the clan shared a roasted hare. Bones cracked, marrow sucked. A few pieces were passed to the dogs who licked their lips with joy. The child saved a piece. The best piece. Still warm, still crisp. They walked with it, slowly toward the river, where the other had gone alone to rinse something in the current. No greeting. Just 2 feet in mud, 2 reflections in the water. The child placed the meat on a flat rock beside the other's knee, then stepped back. A pause. A glance. The other looked down at the food, then up, into eyes that no longer shimmered with certainty. Just a quiet question. And for a moment, that was enough. They ate together that afternoon. Not beside each other, but not far. 2 bites at the same fire. A shared fig, passed without eye contact. 1 cough laugh at a story told by a sibling. A nod, barely. But it was there. The next morning they walked near the stream at the same time. No one asked the other to come. Their feet simply found rhythm in the same direction. They paused at the same berry bush, reached for the same cluster. Their fingers brushed. No one pulled away. Still, there were no words. No. Sorry. No. I missed you. Only things placed where others would find them. A shell with a hole through its centre, left on a sleeping mat. A strip of bark folded into the shape of a bird. A thorn pulled from the heel. A water gourd already filled. They moved like shadows circling the same fire. Close. Flickering. Silent. One night the fire was low. The elders had finished their stories, the stars blinking overhead like watchful eyes. The dogs had curled into their favourite spots, bellies round, dreams twitching behind their paws. The child sat with a stick, drawing lines in the dust. A spiral, a broken circle, a line that turned but never closed. The other walked past, paused, sat. They didn't speak, but the other took the stick and added a single dot to the centre of the spiral, then handed the stick back. And the child felt something in their chest begin to breathe again. Still, no words. But hands moved. At the next gathering, when fish were divided among the families, they reached for the same basket. Instead of arguing, they carried it together, 1 hand at each side. Their steps matched. And though no one said it aloud, even the elders noticed. A knowing smile behind a sip of broth. a grandmother's eyes that lingered a little longer. There was a ceremony the next day, a naming of a newborn. The clan gathered in the circle of stone near the elder tree. Ash was rubbed onto the child's forehead. A name was spoken 3 times. A chant rose. The child and the other stood apart. But when the chant ended and the people began to sing low and hum their joy, they both turned to look at each other. Just a glance. But there was no anger in it, only remembering, only recognition. And in that glance something cracked open. Not completely, but enough. That evening the child picked up the reed pipe they had not touched since before the drift. They had once played it during games, during dances, during laughter. Now it was quiet in their hands. They played one note, then another. It was clumsy, uneven. But the other turned, listened, and smiled. Not fully, but enough. Later that night, while the fire was still hot, and most of the camp had gone to their mats, they sat again by the circle. The child took a piece of charcoal from the fire's edge. On a nearby rock they began to draw. A hand, a path, 2 figures. The sun above. They didn't look up. But they felt the warmth when the other sat beside them. The other took the charcoal. Added one thing, a single heart shaped like a leaf, pressed between the 2 figures. Still, no word was spoken. But they both smiled now, and both knew. Some things don't need names to be real. Some things speak louder when they aren't spoken. And some things, like the ache of losing someone, the hope of being seen again, the spark of forgiveness, can live in glances, in shared meals, in drawings made beside the fire. They sat there a long time, not together, but not apart. And though there was still no word for what had passed between them, they now had something better. Understanding. The elder's eyes. The elder had watched without watching, not spying, not interfering, just witnessing, like a hawk that circles not to catch, but to see the patterns below, like a stone beside the river that feels the footsteps pass and stores them in silence. She'd seen the first glances, shy and brief as spring winds. She had noticed the changed walk, the slow drift of 2 bodies that used to wander separately, now curving near like vines toward the same light. She had seen the space between them once steady, then broken, then healing. Not with her eyes only, but with her memory. Because long ago, before her hair turned white and her fingers curled like old roots, she too had stood in the firelight, unsure of what her chest was saying. She too had tasted the ache of words that had not yet been invented. So she watched. And then she remembered. That night the fire burned low and steady. The camp had eaten early a good hunt. A deer taken down with quiet precision. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of roasted meat. Bellies were full, bones cracked, marrow sucked. Children dozed against their mothers. Dogs sprawled like shadows with fur. The stars blinked awake above, cautious at first, then bold. The elder sat where she always did at the edge of the story circle, near the tall stone that leaned westward like an old man in thought. Her legs were wrapped in fur, her back straight despite its years. And she began to hum. Not loud, not for others, but for the night, and for memory. They came quietly. The 2 who had begun to circle each other again, not hand in hand, not even side by side, but close enough to know they belonged in the same firelight. The elder opened one eye, and then the other. She did not smile. She simply spoke. "Do you know," she said, "how the sky got its colour?" The children nearby lifted their heads. Some elders turned their ears. The 2 young ones, the almost lovers, The almost not said nothing, but they sat together and listened. Once, the elder began, the sky was stone, heavy and dark, it sat low to the earth, and the trees grew short to make space. People walked hunched, birds could not fly, even fire reached only sideways, never up. And in that time, she said, a woman loved a man. Her voice did not waver. The fire crackled as if it knew this story. They never spoke it aloud, there were no words for such things, only the passing of meat between hands, only shared glances over cooking pots, only the hush that fell between them, soft as moss. One night the man went into the woods alone. A hunt, he said, but he did not return. One day passed, then another. The clan whispered maybe he had fallen. Maybe he had gone to find death. Maybe the spirits had taken him. But the woman? She did not accept silence. She followed. Not with torches or spears, but with her bare feet and her knowing. Because love, though unnamed, makes us trackers of the soul. The elder's voice lowered. Some children leaned closer. A dog sighed. The fire hissed. She found him on the 5th day, the elder said, trapped beneath a tree split by lightning, his leg broken and his eyes weak. He thought he had been left behind, but she had come, not to speak, not to ask, but to lift, to carry, to return. She brought him back, and for the first time the sky shifted. It rose just a little, enough for one tree to stretch upward, enough for one hawk to rise, enough for two people to look at each other without lowering their heads. And every time someone loved after that, even if they did not say it, even if they only showed it through the placing of food, the weaving of feathers, the sitting close in silence, the sky rose higher. Until now, the elder whispered, you see it when you lift your chin. That is love. All that space, all that light. She did not look at them directly, the two children who were not quite children anymore, who sat with firelight brushing their faces like a prayer. But her voice softened and deepened. Not all love is easy, she said. It is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a carving, a pause. Sometimes you must lose it to see it. Sometimes it returns in a different form. But if it lives in your hands, if it comes from how you move, how you give, how you wait, then it matters. She reached down and stirred the coals. Sparks flew upward, chasing the stars. And when it matters, she said, the sky remembers. There was no applause, no laughter, only the breath of the camp, only the smell of ash and fir and cooling stone. But the young one sat still, a little closer now, not touching, but not far. The elder closed her eyes and smiled now, just a little, not for herself, but for the story, and for the new one unfolding right beside her, because stories do not end, they become. And this one, this quiet tale of looks and feathers and missteps and returned fire was just beginning. Gathering storm. It began with a sound, not thunder, not yet. Just a shift in the wind, a whisper that moved sideways through the trees, tugging at branches and ruffling the hair at the nape of the neck. The birds heard it first. They stilled, then the insects. Then the leaves themselves, which had been whispering secrets all morning, suddenly fell quiet. The forest was holding its breath. So were they. They had wandered far without meaning to, not quite together, not quite apart, following the same trail, gathering roots and wild mint, pretending the air between them was just air, pretending the heaviness was just humidity. It had been like that for days now. Since the misunderstanding, since the drift. They spoke again, barely in gestures, in glances, but the wound had not yet scarred. It was still pink, still sore, still shaping their steps. But the sky did not care for such human things. It rolled its clouds inward, and the storm came. It didn't arrive like a warning. It came like a breath caught too long. One moment, the air was warm and thick with summer scents. Sweetgrass, crushed berries, pine sap. The next, it was sliced in two by a cold wind that bent the tall ferns sideways and sent the birds scattering like thrown stones. They both looked up. A single drop hit her cheek, another on his brow. They didn't speak. There was no time. The wind howled, sudden and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth, before the rain had even touched the ground. Then came the thunder, not overhead, but close, like a growl from something ancient and angry. Their feet moved without command, not toward camp that was too far now, but toward the slope to the east, where boulders stacked like sleeping beasts, where once, long ago, a cousin had waited out a snowstorm with only dry moss and a rabbit's skull for company. They ran. The first wave of rain fell like stones, heavy, cold, soaking skin in seconds. Hair clung to their faces, grass slicked underfoot, laughter escaped from somewhere unexpected, not joy but disbelief. She slipped once, caught herself. He offered a hand, then pulled it back, then offered again. She took it, just for balance, just for a moment. But their fingers stayed linked longer than necessary. Then the rocks appeared dark shapes through the wall of water. They ducked beneath the lowest one, a lean-to of stone and root that opened into a small hollow just big enough for two. They stumbled in, wet, gasping, alive, and alone. The storm closed the world behind them. Rain drummed on the rock above like 1,000 running feet. Water pooled at the entrance, then trickled in narrow lines down the back wall. Their breaths echoed louder than expected in the hollow space. They did not speak. She wrung water from her braid. He peeled his tunic from one shoulder, steam rising faintly from his skin. Their knees touched once, lightly, and then didn't move away. Silence filled the shelter, but it was not empty. Between them lay the unspoken, the things neither had said, the words they still didn't have. Like how sorry could live in a glance, like how missing someone could sit in the body like a hunger, like how love, if it was love, might look not like firelight, not like poetry, but like two people sharing space in a storm, hearts thudding louder than thunder. She reached into her pouch, pulled out a strip of smoked root, tore it in half and handed it over without looking. He took it, chewed, swallowed, said nothing, but something inside them both softened. The rain shifted again, slower now, more steady, a curtain instead of a war drum. He turned toward her only a little. "I thought," he started, then stopped. She looked at him. Her eyes were tired, wet, but not closed. "What?" "I thought you were angry." A pause. She blinked. The rain trickled down the stone like tears. "I was." Another pause. "But not at you. Not really." They were quiet again. But it wasn't silence now. It was space. Space for breath. For truth. "I didn't understand," he said, "the way you walked away." "I didn't understand the way you didn't follow," she replied. That made him look down. She saw it. Then, gently, "But you're here now." He nodded. "So are you." And then, in that hollow carved by time and water and wind, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a lean, a touch. Her shoulder against his hand resting on the rock beside hers, fingers curling near. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Because there are truths bigger than mouths. There are apologies that need no sound. There are feelings too old for names. And in that tiny shelter under the storm's watchful eye, the ache between them uncoiled like a snake waking to sun. No longer sharp, just present, just known. The rain slowed. Light filtered in, pale and silvery, like the first thread of morning before the sky decides to wake. Their clothes still clung, their hearts still raced, but they were warm now, not from fire, but from each other. And when they finally stood brushing moss from knees, hair from eyes, they did not move apart. They walked back to camp the long way, through the trees now dripping, the air rinsed clean. Hands didn't touch, not yet, but they walked side by side, and the storm like the misunderstanding passed behind them, not forgotten, but weathered, together. The first touch. It did not begin in the moment itself. It began in the days before, in the looks that lingered, in the words left unspoken, in the way one would wait just a moment longer after the other had passed. It began in footsteps that unconsciously matched pace, in hands reaching for the same fig at the same time and pulling back, then laughing, then not laughing. It began like all important things do, not with a shout but a whisper. And on this day the world whispered too. Morning arrived wrapped in cool mist, the kind that hangs low over grass and makes the breath visible, the kind that dulls sound and softens light. Even the birds called more gently, as if their songs might echo too loud in the hush. The camp moved slowly. Firelight flickered but didn't crackle. Children stirred but didn't run. The dogs, usually awake first, lay curled, listening to something deeper than wind. And in the centre of it all, the child, not so much a child, now sat near the edge of the sleeping mats, quietly tying a knot into a strip of sinew. They weren't thinking of what would happen today. They were only thinking of that knot, how it should be tight but not choking, how it must hold and yet yield with time. Across the camp the other rose, stretched, moved without sound through the morning mist, stepping lightly past sleeping limbs and still burning coals. Their eyes met, and the knot slipped from trembling fingers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The morning belonged to those who knew how to wait. Together they walked beyond the edge of the clearing, past the dew-drenched ferns, and over the patch of earth where the roots grew thick and stubborn, toward the trees, toward the hollow path where wildflowers leaned over as if listening. They said nothing, but every breath was a conversation. The path they walked was not new. They had walked it in childhood with others, with laughter, chasing dragonflies and splashing in shallow puddles. But now it felt narrower, more intimate, as if the world itself had drawn closer to watch. Their shoulders brushed once. Neither moved away. Ahead, a fallen tree offered a place to sit, moss-covered, warm in a patch of rising sun. They hesitated, then sat, not quite touching, not quite apart, close enough to feel each other's heat. The silence stretched, not awkward, just deep, like a pool too clear to see the bottom. One of them reached for a blade of grass, twisted it, untwisted it, plucked another. The other watched. Finally, after a long shared breath, a voice spoke soft, nearly swallowed by the wind. Did you ever wonder what comes next? A pause. The answer came slowly. All the time. Another pause. Especially now. The first touch was not dramatic. There was no thunder, no gasp. Just a hand reaching halfway, and another meeting it. Fingers curled. Not clasped, not yet. Just rested, palm to palm. like two pieces of something that had always belonged together but had never dared touch until now. They didn't look at their hands. They looked at each other. Foreheads leaned in, almost in disbelief, almost as if asking permission from the very air between them. And then, softly, so softly their brows touched, the world held its breath. Not a single leaf moved, not a bird sang. Even the insects seemed to wait, because there, on that mossy log, two souls met not in words or fire but in stillness. And the stillness was enough. The first touch lasted longer than a blink, longer than a breath, longer than a memory. It lasted until time forgot how to measure. One of them smiled, not wide, just enough to curve the mouth, to lift the cheek, to soften the eyes. The other closed their eyes for a heartbeat. When they opened again, the smile was mirrored, and still they said nothing. Because the body speaks louder than language, and this was a conversation of closeness, of skin and heat and shared stillness. Later they would return to camp, and nothing would seem different. They would sit where they always sat, help with food, carve tools, stoke the fire. No one would ask. No one would name what had happened. But a few would notice the way their movements aligned more easily, the way laughter came quicker, the way their eyes found each other in crowded spaces. The elder might smile faintly. A younger child might ask why one of them now wore a braid with a single red bead. But mostly, the change would remain unspoken, like all sacred things. That night, by the fire, the stars emerged slowly, one by one. They sat beside each other, again not quite touching, but a hand just one rested close enough to graze. And this time, when it did, neither moved. There was still no word for love, no carved symbol, no chant. But love didn't mind. It had never needed words. It lived in moments, in mossy logs, in joined hands, in silent agreements, in foreheads gently leaning together in morning mist. And in that stillness, that infinite, wordless stillness, love lived loudly. When the clan noticed, it began not with words, but with glances sideways and fleeting, quickly followed by soft smiles or the turning of eyes toward tasks already known by heart. The clan did not speak of it, not right away. They did not gather to name it or mark it or question it. They simply noticed. As the morning light slid down the slope of the eastern hill, spilling like warm milk over the camp, a mother paused in her braiding, her fingers still just long enough to see the two of them sitting close, not touching but close enough to share the same sunbeam, the same silence. She smiled to herself, not because it was amusing, but because it was right. Because it was time. Others saw too. The child who had once chased lizards through tall grass now paused in her play, cocking her head as if listening to something distant. Her eyes followed the pair as they walked toward the water, footsteps nearly synchronized, laughter wrapped in hush. She whispered something to her brother. He nodded. Neither teased. They were too young for teasing, but not too young to understand what it meant when two people's shadows leaned into one another. The elder who wove baskets by the fire didn't lift her head, didn't interrupt her work, but her ears were always listening, her hands always knew, and she knew this too. The rhythm between them had changed. Their silences had taken on shape. Their breath had begun to share a single thread. She tied a knot tighter than needed, smiled. The forest had noticed too. Even the dogs, who had no words and no patience for human subtleties, moved differently around the two. One, the older grey one with a bent ear and a bark like cracked stone, curled at their feet more than usual. Another brought them the same stick 3 times, tail wagging with a kind of knowing. Animals do not understand love the way we do. They understand the pull of warmth, the way scent lingers longer on someone who matters. And so they watched and stayed close. There was no announcement, no moment when the clan gathered and said, "It has happened." There was just the firelight at dusk, when someone handed out bowls of stew, and one bowl passed from one hand to another with just a second more care. There was the moment in the morning when tools were chosen for scraping hides, and 2 pairs of hands reached for the same one, then paused, then let the moment stretch, then laughed. There was the night when a story was told, and someone asked about the old tale, the one where 2 stars moved closer and closer across seasons, until they became one. The elder told it, slowly, eyes half closed, but she did not look at the stars. She looked at them. And they, without meaning to, reached for each other's hands. Not tightly, just enough. By the river, a cousin placed a feather crown on one of their heads and said nothing. Later, it was worn all the way back to camp. No one asked why. No one needed to. There was respect in the quiet. Not silence born from awkwardness, but reverence the kind reserved for sacred places, for moments when the air feels thick with something holy. It was not fear, it was recognition. Like the way you pause when stepping into a sunlit grove, or the way your breath catches when a deer looks you in the eyes. They were not children playing anymore. They were something else now, something forming, something that held the potential of stories. One morning, while skinning fish by the stream, an aunt hummed a tune known to all the kind sung at bonding feasts when new unions were blessed by fire and song. She didn't say a word, just hummed. And when the 2 paused their task, heads tilting toward the sound, she only smiled and returned to her blade. They didn't speak of it later, but the song followed them the rest of the day, clinging like pollen. In the night, as firelight flickered across stone and skin and the last bits of marrow were sucked from the bones, a young boy asked too loudly, "Will they sleep in one tent now?" His mother hushed him gently. Not harshly, just enough. She looked across the fire at the pair and saw they were already looking down, cheeks warm with new heat. The elder man with the crooked back chuckled once. Not unkindly, just once. And the subject faded back into the rhythm of the flames. The sky turned violet. A hawk cried overhead. And in the heart of the camp something shifted. It was not a celebration. Not yet. But it was a recognition the way the trees might bend a little lower over 2 figures walking home together, the way stars might arrange themselves more generously when gazed at by 2 hearts beating close. The land approved. You could feel it in the way the breeze wrapped around them and no one else, in the way the earth seemed to hush under their feet, in the way no one asked, "What are you?" and instead simply lived alongside the answer. That night in their separate shelters, they lay with eyes wide open, listening to the same wind, watching the same fire through cracks in hide, and dreaming the same dream of one day not walking apart, not waiting for glances, not needing the silence to speak for them, of just being together, openly, without whispers, without noticing, because one day it wouldn't be noticed, it would just be. Naming the feeling. The sun had slid beyond the edge of the world, leaving behind a sky thick with stars and stories. The fire was low now, not roaring like in feast times, but glowing soft and deep like the coals of a heart that had burned long and steady. Around it the clan had quieted. Some slept, some hummed, some carved or wove by moonlight. No one rushed, no one hurried. Time had thinned. And in that thinning, two figures sat near the outer ring of light, not quite in shadow, not quite in the centre, somewhere in between the space where things become possible. They weren't speaking, but they weren't silent either. They were being, and that was enough, until the elder came. She moved like she always did with slow certainty, as if the ground had been waiting for her step. She carried nothing but a pouch made from old wolf hide, stitched with faded beads. The bones inside clicked faintly, the sound of history, of memory, of teaching. She sat across from them, across the fire, knees creaking like tired branches. She said nothing for a long while, only watched, only listened. Finally, she spoke. "Do you know the word?" she asked, her voice like wind through dry leaves. They looked at each other, unsure, then back at her. "Which word?" one asked softly. The elder smiled, not with teeth, but with time. "The word for what you are," she said, "what you feel, what you hold in your hands when your hands don't touch, the word for the space between you." They didn't answer, because they didn't know. Not in sound, not yet. "There was a word," the elder continued, "long ago, before your mother's mother was born, before my bones stopped dancing. It was not said often. It did not need to be, but when it was spoken, the world listened." She opened the pouch. Inside, a stone smooth and dark, worn by many fingers. She passed it to them. "Say it," she whispered. They took turns holding the stone. It was warmer than it should have been. And then she said it, one syllable, soft and round, like the hush of a deer in morning grass, like the sound water makes when it touches skin. It didn't mean love exactly, but it held love. It meant the feeling that lives in your chest when you wait for their voice. It meant the ache that isn't pain, the silence that isn't empty. It meant, I see you, and in you I remember something I never knew I lost. They repeated it, hesitant at first, then again, then softer. Not out loud anymore, but with breath, with thought. And then it was theirs, their word, their secret name. They said it that night under the stars, curled beside each other with the stone between them. They whispered it into each other's palms, pressed it into each other's shoulders, let it bloom behind their teeth like something too sacred to chew. The sky did not change. The fire did not roar. The clan did not stir. But inside them, something ancient cracked open, and a truth flowed out. In the days that followed, they used the word sparingly, not in camp, not while gathering wood or cleaning fish or stitching hides, only in moments when the wind carried secrets or when the moonlight turned the forest silver. They carved it once, together behind a stone near the stream. Not letters, not symbols anyone else would read, just a curl and a line, a shape that meant you and me, here, now. When one returned from a hunt, they said it by leaving a handful of berries on a mat. When the other sang with the elders, they said it by glancing back between verses. When one was sick, they said it by pressing a damp cloth to a fevered brow, lips moving in rhythm with breath. When they were happy, they didn't say it at all. They just laughed. Others noticed again. Not with words still, but with eyes that lingered, with steps that slowed. One morning the cousin with sharp eyes whispered, "They have a word now." The brother nodded, chewing a root. "I think I heard it once." But when asked what it meant, neither could say, because it wasn't theirs to explain. The elder returned only once more with the pouch. This time she gave them each a carved shell, tiny and smooth. One had a hole, the other a peg. They fit together without force. She said nothing, but they knew. It was not a gift. It was a passing of something old, of something important, of something sacred. At night the word echoed in dreams. It curled around their ribs and stretched through their fingers. It sat in their mouths like sweetness, like fruit warmed by sun. They never shouted it, never threw it across the clearing. It wasn't that kind of word. It was for whispers, for glances, for that moment when two people sitting in the hush between stories feel the same warmth in their chest and know it is not just fire. It is them. It is the word. And though they never taught it to others, not fully, the sound of it began to ripple in the tone of songs, in the pacing of footsteps, in the way children started looking at each other just a little longer than before. The world had changed. Quietly. Completely. Because now it had a name for what had always been there. Footprints in the dust. The earth was warm beneath bare feet. Not hot, not harsh, just warm enough to remind them the sun had passed this way already, stretching her golden fingers across the land, kissing the grasses and waking the stones. And two walked together, always now, not with fingers always touching, not with heads always bowed toward one another, but together, in rhythm, in silence, in knowing. Where one turned, the other leaned. Where one paused, the other breathed slower. Their feet made twin marks in the soft dust of the path, prints almost identical in spacing and size, not because they matched, but because they listened to each other, to the ground, to the quiet between words. Others noticed. They always did, even when nothing was said. A sister gathering berries stopped and smiled when she saw the trail of footprints behind the thorn bush. They came this way, she whispered to herself, not with envy, but with memory of when her own feet once walked like that. A cousin, sharpening a blade near the fire, glanced up when they returned together. Not hand in hand, but shadow close. The cousin nudged his friend with an elbow. No joke followed, just a nod. Even the dogs knew. They circled the pair not as guards, not as scouts, but as if circling one being with two heartbeats. The elders said little, as always. But one afternoon, when the sun sat high and heavy above the horizon and the earth smelled of pine and cracked seeds, the old woman with the ivory beads sat near the path where their prints had formed. She traced the marks with her fingertips. Soft dust. 2 lines, side by side. She did not speak. But when the younger children gathered near, she waved her hand gently and murmured, "Look well, little ones. Not all trails are made by hunters. Some carry other truths." The children knelt and touched the prints, giggling, pretending to follow. They didn't know what they were learning. Not yet. At the riverbank, the pair walked again. The river, always watching, reflected them side by side, swaying slightly with the breeze, like grass grown tall from the same root. They stopped to drink. One cupped water in both hands and offered it without word. The other drank, eyes never leaving the sky's reflection. The water shimmered with dragonflies. A frog chirped. Their silence stretched unbroken until the first one smiled. And the smile said everything. They followed no straight trail. Sometimes they wandered to the caves, where red ochre stories painted ancestors into stone. Sometimes they walked to the cliffs, where the wind carried hawk cries and the world opened wide. Sometimes they simply circled the camp, quiet steps echoing around sleeping dogs and weaving mothers and singing children. Wherever they went, they left behind those twin lines in the dust. A quiet map, a gentle story. One day, a boy not yet old enough to hunt followed them for fun. He crept along behind, walking carefully in the same prints, heel to toe. He thought he was sneaky, but they knew. They just didn't say. When the path curved through a patch of tall grass, they stopped letting the boy catch up, breathless and smiling. "You walk our steps?" one asked, playful. He grinned. "I want to see where you go." They looked at each other, then back at him. "Someday you will." And they let him walk between them for a time, 3 prints now, weaving through dust and grass, a new shape forming in the trail, a triangle, a lineage. One night, after a gathering, stories told, meat shared, songs hummed to the moon, they sat side by side near the edge of the firelight. Others danced. Some still laughed. But they were quiet. Not tired. Just still. Like trees that had grown side by side too long to need movement to feel connected. One leaned their head on the other's shoulder. No one stared. The fire popped softly. Sparks rose into the dark. Overhead, stars blinked curious. And in the dust beneath them, their footprints from earlier still remained, undisturbed. Later that season the rains came. Not heavy, not storming, but soft and steady, the kind that kissed the earth clean. Paths blurred. Dust hardened, then turned to mud. The footprints vanished. And for a brief moment the world forgot they had walked there. But only the surface forgot, because the ground still remembered, the way footsteps had shaped it. The way two had become one over and over in the dance of movement and stillness. The clan remembered too, not with drawings or songs, but in how they spoke of them now, always as a pair. They found the hive, someone would say, the two of them. Ask them they've seen that tree. They go there often. They know, as if their joined path was a single name. One morning, just after the rain, a child found fresh footprints on the path again, side by side. Not deep, not hurried, just present. She knelt and traced one with a fingertip, then stood in it with both her feet, letting the shape hold her. Then she stepped forward, leaving her own beside theirs, and the path grew. The story spread without ever being told. It spread in the way people walked beside one another a little more often, in how younger ones glanced at each other differently when the moon was high, in how the campfire gatherings left a space open just enough for those who wished to sit shoulder to shoulder and say nothing at all. Because love, once walked, never stays still. It leaves prints in the dust, in the mind, in the spaces between moments, and so they continued. Not loudly, not brightly, just together, step by step. Their path winding through the Stone Age, not as legend, but as presence, as echo, as example. And long after their names were gone, if they ever had them, the earth still carried the memory of two who walked as one. Footprints side by side. A story, grown gently, written in dust, and never quite erased. The fire carries the story. Night came gently. Not suddenly, not with fear, but like a mother laying a soft hand over the brow of the earth. The sky darkened slowly, and the stars blinked into life one by one, not rushed, not loud, just there. The fire was already alive when they gathered, not roaring, just breathing. A steady pulse of flame at the camp's centre, built from dry branches, old bark and care. Smoke curled upward like a whisper climbing toward the stars. The sparks danced like insects, and the wood popped in small satisfied sighs. The children came first, as they always did, drawn by the warmth, the flicker, the promise of story. They arrived in 2s and 3s with grass still in their hair, with scrapes on their knees from climbing stones too tall. They came with open faces, with eyes wide as bowls, with silence in their mouths waiting to be filled. Then the elders, slow steps, crooked backs, eyes that had seen many fires, many nights, many tales. They seated themselves on logs, on stones, on mats of reed. Some rubbed their hands together, others held sleeping dogs in their laps. But all waited for the story. The old woman with the ivory beads cleared her throat. Just once. The camp quieted not by force but by reverence. Even the dogs stopped scratching, even the babies quieted in their mother's arms. The fire crackled. She spoke. There was a time, she began, before this night, before this season, before even the trees behind us had grown tall. The children leaned in. When love had no name. No one stirred. No one interrupted. The fire carried her voice. They were not special, not more than others. One gathered roots, the other carved stone. One sang quietly to themselves. The other watched the river with eyes too deep for their age. A log shifted in the fire. Sparks leapt, casting shadows like ghosts on the tent walls. They did not know what it was, this thing between them. It came not with drums or lightning. It came softly like footsteps in moss. It came quietly like water changing stone. She paused. A child near the fire wrapped their arms around their knees, eyes round. They walked together. She said it simply, as if that were enough. And it was. They walked, not always touching, not always speaking, but where one turned, the other followed. Where one laughed, the other listened. One of the younger boys whispered, "Did they kiss?" An older girl elbowed him, shushing. The elder only smiled, soft and slow. No one kissed yet. There were no words, no rules, no need. There was only being. She drew a slow circle in the dirt with her finger. They gave each other feathers, stones, time. They sat by the same fire even when others left. They noticed when the other was not there. A mother in the back sighed, remembering something or someone. Then, one day, the rains came, a storm that frightened the little ones, a flood that cracked the riverbank. But they were together under stone beneath the sky, and they laughed, even while wet, even while cold, because in that moment they knew this was more than a season. The fire flared, a brief gust of wind feeding it from behind. The children gasped. The elder waited until the flame quieted again. Others began to notice the footprints, always beside one another, the way their eyes searched the crowd and always stopped at one face, the way their silence was full, not empty. One child whispered, "Like now?" She looked at them, not scolding but seeing. "Yes," she said, "like now." She leaned forward. The beads around her neck clicked softly. And one night like this they sat beside the fire, and the story was told for the first time not by mouth, but by presence, not with a name but with a glance, and the flame knew. It crackled louder. It leaned toward them. She reached into the fire not to touch it, but to gather its warmth in her open palms. The fire remembers. She turned, looking at each child, each face. Her voice softened. We think flames eat wood, but really they eat memory. They burn the moments into smoke, into ash, into light that climbs the sky. Another log shifted. A small tower of coals collapsed. The red glow pulsed. "They're gone now," the elder said. "Those two. Their feet no longer press the earth. Their hands no longer weave reeds or clean fish. But their story..." She placed a hand on her chest. "It burns here." Then she placed that hand over the fire. "And here..." The children sat silent, breathing in the glow. No one asked their names. No one needed to. After a while, a younger girl stood. She had long hair and a feather tucked behind her ear, not one she'd found, but one someone had given her. She stepped close to the fire. "I saw two by the river," she whispered. The elder nodded. "I saw them too," another child said. They don't say anything, the girl added. They don't have to, the elder smiled. The flames flickered brighter as if stirred by the truth. One by one, the others began to speak. Not loudly, just soft fragments. I left berries on someone's mat. I helped her carry water. He gave me a stone that looks like the moon. The fire crackled louder, catching the edges of the wind's breath. They didn't say a love, the elder said at last, because that word did not exist. She looked up at the stars, then back to the flame. But the fire knew. Much later, long after the last log burned low, long after the youngest had fallen asleep against the warmth of dogs and older siblings, the fire still glowed. It pulsed gently, not fading, not fierce, just steady. Like a heartbeat, like a memory. And somewhere, far off in the darkness, two shadows walked side by side through the grass. No one saw them, but the fire flickered once more as if in greeting. And the night breathed a little warmer. The stone still holds their names. Time moved like wind, not in great leaps, but in steady sweeping breaths brushing over bark, stirring the tall grass, carrying ash to places no one remembered. Seasons came and went in circles. Winters bowed to spring, summers leaned into autumn, and the fires never fully died. They only dimmed, shifted, slept in coals until hands stirred them back awake. The clan changed. Children became elders. Elders returned to the earth. Stories were told and told again, passed in whispers and song, in gestures beside flames, in glances between the young who didn't yet have names for what they felt. And still, by the old river, the stone remained. It stood a little off the path now, half swallowed by reeds, softened at the edges by rain and time. Moss gathered in its grooves, lichen made tiny constellations on its surface, but beneath it all, if one looked closely, there was still the spiral, carved deep, deliberate. It wasn't a name in letters. There were no symbols that could be spoken, just a curl inside a curl drawn by hands, long gone hands that once touched, not just stone but another soul. Those who came after didn't know exactly what it meant. They only knew that the spot felt different, that when you stood there, beneath the willow tree whose branches now swept the water, the air was quieter, thicker, more aware, as if the land was listening, as if something old still breathed between the grass and the stone. Children still wandered there, some drawn by curiosity, some by dreams they couldn't explain, some by the pull of footsteps they hadn't meant to follow. They'd find the spiral by accident, fingers tracing the worn groove without knowing why. And always they'd pause, not to speak, but to feel. Because the spiral still held something, a memory, a warmth, a wordless truth passed down not in stories but in silence. One day, a girl came with a feather in her hair and a stone in her palm. She wasn't looking for the spiral. She was looking for stillness, for a place to think after someone had said something that made her heart beat too loud. She sat near the river, letting the water speak its ancient language. And when she leaned back, her hand landed on the stone. She didn't cry out. She just looked down and saw it, the spiral, faint but certain. Her fingers found the groove and followed it. She didn't know the story, but she knew it mattered. So she placed her stone in the center of the spiral, left it there, and walked home slower than before. Later that night by the fire her father told an old tale, not about gods, not about hunts, but about two who had walked together in a time before the word love had weight. He said they carved no names. He said they needed none. Only the spiral, only the stone. and the feeling that followed like a shadow behind them. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes glowed with something the fire seemed to recognize. Seasons passed again. The river changed course just slightly, as rivers do. The tree grew older, its branches bent deeper toward the water, as if trying to sip its own reflection. The spiral faded further, but not entirely. Some tried to clean it. Some tried to redraw it. But the ones who knew better simply left offerings, a braid of grass, a shell from the sea, a feather from a blackbird. They didn't speak aloud why. They didn't have to. Even when the clan moved, pushed by weather or herds, or the pull of distant stars, someone always stayed behind long enough to stand by the spiral. To whisper. To remember. Not names, not faces, but the feeling. Because though the flames of the original fire had long since turned to soil, though the hands that once touched had become part of the earth, the love had not ended. It had simply softened, spread, became part of the air, part of the river, part of the way someone touches another's shoulder without knowing why. Sometimes two would walk together on that path and stop where the stone lay. They wouldn't say, "This is where they loved." They wouldn't say anything at all. But one might pick up a stone, the other a feather, and both would kneel, and leave them there not to mark, not to mimic, but to participate in something still unfolding, a spiral still turning. Once a very old man, older than most trees, returned to the place one last time. He had walked that path as a child, chasing dragonflies. As a youth, he'd sat beneath the willow, braiding grass beside someone who never left his thoughts. Now, bent and slow, he knelt by the spiral with shaking hands. He didn't speak. He just pressed his palm to the stone and smiled, not for the past, not even for memory, but for the truth that had outlived both. So, the spiral remained. And even as generations passed and languages shifted and fire circles moved to new hills, the stone stood. Maybe someday the spiral would fade completely. Maybe someday moss would hide it entirely, or the river would rise and carry it away. But the feeling, the thing without a name, it would remain, in how two people walk beside each other, in how silence can feel full, in how children pause at certain places and say, "Something happened here," and in how no one has to answer, because the spiral still speaks, and the stone still holds their names, even if no one remembers how to say them.